and you saw a few technical glitches. We did have some technical glitches this morning. One getting
Yes.
on, and then when we went live. So hopefully we are all okay. If not, anyway, welcome to OSW Daily.
Welcome.
Welcome. Here I am, Steve Todd, founder of Open Source
Here I
Workplace,
am,
global head of
Mike
Workplace.
Petresky.
Mike Petresky.
We should just do a back and forth.
I know.
Hi,
I know.
I'm here. Steve's here. It's
Sometimes
Thursday.
sometimes we're here, sometimes we're not here, and that's just how we roll. But so Mike, look, let's shall we kick on? Should we just kick on with it's just gonna be all downhill
Yeah,
from here, like
sure.
you
Do
know.
it.
So let's go.
I'm not
So
going to repeat my story. I'm just going to go ahead. I'll say yup again, and we can get going. Yup.
Yup, there we go. Thank you, Mike. So today, yeah. So with the content we're going to talk about, we were talking about YouTube just before we get kicked off, Mike, and I was telling you about one of the things that I love about YouTube is the fact that you watch something and then YouTube goes, you might like this too. And this popped up this morning on my feed. This is a Colliers podcast that they publish on YouTube, and I got to hear it. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about something that was forwarded to me by Ray Mays, my boss at NASDAQ. CBRE's Global Occupier Sentiment Survey. Really, really good survey, Mike, and I'll explain why, what I think so anyway. And then some of the brutal realities of the future of work, which you shared with me. And you were a little tentative about whether or not we go through and what we discuss about this. And then actually, I don't know if you then clicked through, one of the things that was mentioned in that article was Neil Usher's
Yes.
his
Yes.
post on the future of workplace and the fantastic future workplace. So that's what we're going to talk about today. There's a lot to get through, and so it should be fun, should be exciting. If anyone's watching has comments, likes what we're doing, hit that like button, make those comments wherever you are. We'll try and do our best to respond to each as we go. We want this to be interactive. We want this to be beneficial. So yeah, let's keep going, Mike. Let's keep going.
Let's do it. Yeah.
All
So I
right.
didn't have a chance to watch or listen to, I should say, the YouTube podcast
Yes.
from Colliers. So you'll have to give me the synopsis.
No,
Oh,
I
you
will.
got it on the screen
And I've got
here.
it on the
Okay.
screen. And it's really good. And Colliers have started, this is the third in the series. And what they're doing is each of their advisory team is interviewing one of their clients, and the client is sort of explaining, walking in through, how COVID has impacted their office, how COVID has impacted the organization, what they think the future of work and what their approach is. So it's really interesting to sort of do a deep dive into an individual location, an individual company.
Sure.
And the key takeaway that I loved about this was rather than talking about, a new normal, they're actually talking about a new better. That's the sort of phrase that they're looking at. So how do we come out of this better as an organization, a better workplace environment for the organization, and what are the things that we need to do to design those things? And Paul Young is the CEO of Aon at Hong Kong Limited, was explaining their approach and some of the things that they're having to deliver a new building during COVID. And also they're transitioning from fully assigned to activity-based working. Now,
Right.
he sort of talks about, we're probably fortunate that we made that decision and we were down that path in a sense of the change management process was ongoing. The office was designed to allow them to design for activities, so they really get to deep dive into what employees are doing, the functions that they're doing, where they need to do that, what is the environment that makes them their most productive. Because as you know, Mike, when you do activity-based working, you have to really dig deep into what individuals do. And therefore, he then rules out, okay, so activity-based working, what is that, and what are the benefits of that? And the whole Aon ethos at the moment is a new better, which I loved.
Yeah, I like the new better. I love that sound of that phrase. I've been using new reality.
Yeah.
Let's take this opportunity and make the adjustments we need to be better off going forward. So I love that sentiment. Aon, I haven't heard the podcast. I'm not sure about the folks in Hong Kong, but I know some folks here in the U.S. That have worked with Aon and actually are customers of iOffice. So I don't know a lot of the details, but I know they've been using our tools to, basically execute on these activity-based working plans, probably among many tools, because they're a huge company, huge organization. But the ability to leverage technology and to put strategies in place that allow employees to be not only the best they can be, but now feel safe and feel comfortable going forward during COVID and into the future once we get beyond COVID. And I look forward to having that conversation with you too, because there are some good signs out there, hopefully with a vaccine on the horizon. This may not be forever, Steve. It seems like when they're in the middle of the dark times, it's like never going to change. But there's kind of now two conversations we can have, the one of living with COVID and then looking forward to planning a future without it, hopefully.
Yeah, no, let's hope so, Mike. Let's hope so. And I think today, some of the articles, maybe have a negative connotation or more of alarming connotation. But I think what everyone's trying to do is promote this positivity, that actually there is a positive way and there is a future with this. And actually, as a society, workplace has a really important part to play as part of that. And, that's what Paul was talking about. And we're going to see that come through and resonate in some of the other content we're going to discuss today. So this is the, this is a CBRE study. This was shared with me, as I mentioned before, by my boss, Ray Mays at NASDAQ. And first thing that there's two things that pop out to me initially. One is, I love the title, Occupier Sentiment Survey. So this is trying to share, what were people's feelings, what were people's emotions, and a lot of the data within their survey actually is pre-COVID and what they think the future is going to look like. But the other element I love about this, Mike, is there's only 126 respondents, but they're all senior level real estate executives. So this is real estate people hearing from other real estate people about how their organizations are approaching COVID, future of work, and all the many other topics that are discussed and questions that were asked within the survey. Now, this article is 21 pages, and for you and I to discuss 21 pages in a few minutes would be quite a challenge. So what we put together there is just the headlines, the key takeaways, and what sort of resonated with me was I'm trying to pick my words very carefully here. So the world is going to change, workplace is going to change, and how do we do it? We need to do it slowly, we need to do it in an iterative process, and also we need to build in flexibility. We know our employees want flexibility. What we don't know, and I think it's fair to assume, organizations and employees don't know how much flexibility we will want tomorrow, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months. So we think we know what the long-term future looks like, in a sense of, we know real estate workplace will still be required, but there's going to be a path to get to that. To your point you just made, right, there will be vaccines. There is a view to seeing a future beyond COVID. So how do we navigate where we are today to that future? And this survey basically collects and pulls together all the minds of those individuals and puts it together beautifully. Lots of nice graphs with really, really good questions being asked and answered. It's really cool.
I know for a guy like you, this is like a dream, right? The deep dive into the numbers, the financials, charts, graphs. For me, it was like, blurred vision. I couldn't process much of it. So that's why the headlines are so important. But I agree with the headlines. The fact that flexibility is key, that we shouldn't make rash decisions about our portfolios, our strategies, until we get a better picture. So be agile, adaptable here in the near term, but also with a look to the longer term. And just as an anecdote here, this is a friend of mine, a local business owner, certainly not a Fortune 500 company, but someone who I've heard has to deal with this reality of living through the pandemic and making decisions for their business. And the fact that he told me, and he's been through the emotions over these last few months, is that he had signed his 5-year lease in his current office building just before the pandemic hit. And as they all went into lockdown, everybody left the building, all his employees went home, and then they realized how well they were functioning from home. He had these moments of regret and saying, boy, I wish I didn't sign that lease for 5 years. I'm locked in. If I made that choice today, knowing what I know now, I might not have. I might have said, let's reduce the space or find something smaller or eliminate it completely. I've heard people talking like that in the early months of the pandemic. We're now here with a little more thoughtfulness and his planning for the future and planning to hire more workers, maybe more remote workers. It's very interesting to see in a very small real world example with a friend who's very transparent with me. about the emotions and the decision making going on for a business. That I'm sure we can extrapolate some of these thoughts out to the big Fortune 500 companies. But at the end of the day, he's like, I'm glad I didn't, have the need to make that lease decision, back in April or May, because he now is seeing the value of both the workplace continuing and having that physical presence, while also maybe leveraging some of the new opportunities with remote work and all those things that we talk about here. So, taking our time and making decisions wisely is something I think that is reflected in this CBRE article.
No, it absolutely is. And I think you touched on a really important point, right? People want to come together. People will always want to come together. And that's the purpose of the office, right? To bring people together. So bringing people together, I think what may change, and that's the bit that we don't know, is why will people come together? We know they're going to come together for social interaction, right? But why are they coming together? For what's the outcome that we want to deliver in that social interaction of what people are doing in the office? And that's the key question. And it's going to be very different for different people, different teams, departments, organizations, locations, companies, right? It is going to be very, very different. And I think as workplace leaders, it's something that's certainly the back of my mind, and something I'm always thinking about is what is that purpose? Why will people come together? What do people need to be free, or in their own minds be released of fear, move from the safety of their own homes to a safety of an office environment, so that they can continue these social interactions with colleagues? And we're going to come to the articles next to sort of talk about some of the fear factors and some of the outcomes, or some of the observations of people continuing to live as we're living, as we go through.
No one size fits all, for sure.
Correct, man. So here we go. This is one that's kind of really interesting, Mike, and you sent this through to me, and I read it this morning. It's a tough one to sort of not tough one to talk about, but it's a tough one to summarize, because it's so deep. But the underlying tone that comes through to here for me was, there is a society that is closed. There is a society that actually isn't open. As individuals, we're becoming more secluse. Is that the right word?
Secluded or isolated?
Isolated, right? But we're enjoying the isolation. With that isolation, actually, then you don't get connectedness. You don't expand your networks. You don't expand your mindset. You don't expand the economy. You don't expand your, your organizations. And with that, then there's a fear. And actually, there's a lot of information driving that fear. There's a lot of media publicity driving a lot of that fear. And, we also have to take responsibility for then some of that information that we take in. And we then have to think about, okay, so how should we think about these things? And the writer Mark, talks about walking through New York City, that actually the beautiful thing about walking through a huge city like New York is that diversity. The things you see, the things you witness. New York's full of just very different people. And, for people watching, I love people watching. It's a wonderful place to be. Now, as we think about and we look about this, we live in isolation. Well, then we're no longer exposed to that. We no longer see that variety, that diversity. What we do is we form bonds with people who are very like-minded, and therefore we probably limit our ability to think beyond that group. And there's so many, as I said, there's so many different things in here, and those are just like a couple of things that I took away that was like resonated with me.
Yeah. Leave it to Mark Eltringham, who's been a guest on my podcast, brilliant thinker around workplace, and the fact that he links to a Neil Usher article we'll talk about in a second too.
Yeah.
Those guys over in Europe, your friends in the UK, have just this intellect and this ability to speak, and it comes through in their writing. It's not even because of the accents. I was going to write it off as just because of the British accents elevating their IQs, but no, the article from Mark, and I read a lot of his stuff, and half of it goes over my head, if not more, because he references history and old Florence, the creative community there that just disappeared. And I don't even really understand the reference. I'm familiar with it somewhat through my education, but I got to do a deep dive into it. But he's bringing up a point here that I don't think many people are thinking about, and it's that kind of negative, unintended consequence of this situation we're in. And our goal is to be more connected and to be more inclusive and and the fact that he describes that great, what makes New York City great and makes the workplace great, is that you come into a place where you have a common, mission and goal and life, and you look past a lot of the superficial differences among human beings, which are ever present, especially in our society today. And I'm sadly thinking that the timing of this pandemic, which is putting everybody into their corners, leaving them to, as you say, connect and communicate only with those news networks and those social media channels where they are in an echo chamber and hear from the people that are just like them. That's our natural tendency as humans, is to migrate towards those similar to us. We're missing out on the things that are so great about humanity and all that diversity. So the danger of this isolation, and it's a natural thing, and we get used to it. I think he was saying that you do it long enough, and it's hard. It gets more uncomfortable going back out into the world and going back into re-engaging in the workplace potentially. So it's a great point, and it's a great situation. We do not want to allow this segregation, this forced isolation and segregation that's taking place, to continue indefinitely. We're going to have to really be challenging ourselves and our workforces and those in our communities, Steve, to get out of their comfort zones and re-engage in the public and in the workplace. And it may be something they have to do because COVID will always be a threat, or there'll be other threats that replace it. And how are we going to do? Are we going to just go back into our own little bubbles and stay safe in our homes? I don't think that's a wise move for society.
Totally agree. Now, as you were talking, I was thinking through the article, and just more and more questions came to my head, and I'm going to throw these at you, and you can deflect or push away or do whatever you want to do, Mike. It's. I know you're good at deflecting and all the rest, and that's a compliment. That's a compliment.
My Wonder Woman wrist bracelets.
There you go. But
the bullets coming at me.
If you take what we just said, right, and we talk about society, and we talk about that we need to do what we can as individuals first, right? Has to start with the individual. You can't expect other people to do it for you. We have to take responsibility for ourselves. So as you think about what you've just said, and you think about that in yourself, is there things that you think you would like to do more of to ensure that doesn't happen to you? Or do you think you have a wide enough network, you connect frequently enough with enough different people, different mindsets, different perspectives? Is that something you think about?
Well, personally, I think I'm very blessed, and you and I are privileged to have a platform where we are able to have conversations with people, because it's part of what we do on a day-to-day basis. I think of the majority of workers who are only now interacting with their teammates at work, occasionally over Zoom, not having the commute to work, therefore not having those interactions you'd have naturally with other members of the city in which you live, or just human beings across, your normal routine in a public life that we used to live, that we don't now. So I do miss that piece of it. And I also, I'll tell you, this is my personal example, because of the social distancing requirements and because everybody's on edge, the thing that was something I enjoyed that was always a little uncomfortable for me was, interacting with neighbors on the street. Do I interrupt a neighbor when they're walking by, walking their dog, and try to have a conversation? Maybe it's not a good time for them. Do we get together and hang out on their deck or whatever? Well, as the pandemic hit these last several months, it's become more isolating, even though we already had this tendency towards everybody kind of living their own lives. I was always one to try to wave and try to have those little conversations, but now I feel that's not acceptable, and therefore I don't do it as often, and it's actually not something that comes naturally to me. So it's almost like it's okay, I can do without that. But what are we missing out on as people, as communities, both in our neighborhoods and then also this broader community of the city and the workplace? So I worry about that, just as a personal example. But I do feel thankful that I have my continuing live stream and interviews and our conversations each day. And the fact that I interact with so many people, diverse groups of people and diverse individuals who have different perspectives, that I don't think I'm missing out as much as many people are.
Good. I'm glad to hear. And I actually asked you the question, and it's something that goes through my head regularly. It's the reason it goes through my head is, like you mentioned, right? We have very big networks, people we can call up, people we can sort of gravitate to, get opinions and thoughts from. But the challenge I'm trying to give to myself is, can I find people who think differently to me, so that I can see different perspectives, different ways of approaching things, different ways that I can learn and sort of add more strings to my bow, you know. And it's not hard. It's not hard. It's not easy to find, because we naturally gravitate to people who think like us, and it's tough. I think it's hard, but I think it's a really important thing that we do. And you know, and the reason why I think at this moment in time, I think it is easier to get people's attention, because people do have, I think, a little more time on their hands, a little more open to, you know, 15-minute conversations. Because for you to have a 15-minute conversation when, you know, pre-COVID, actually it took a lot longer, because you had to coordinate. Maybe you were going to meet up for a coffee. You have to leave the office, go get a coffee. It usually takes longer than 15 minutes. You got to get back. So it's 30, 45 minutes, where
Yeah.
today you can have 15 minutes on Zoom. You feel connected. You say hello. You get to see people's faces. And I also think then going forward, you know, until we get to a point where there is the vaccine and we can interact fully with people, we're going to approach people with masks. And that's sort of, I don't know how our brains are going to, you know, deal with that.
It's going to be interesting.
It's going to be, yeah, it is. So I know I kind of went off on a tangent, but it's just more of, as we were sort of thinking about this, my thoughts went a little
Well,
bit
when you
further.
first started on that tangent, I was thinking about finding diverse viewpoints is difficult in the fact that you and I do it publicly over YouTube or
Yeah.
you know, a live stream or a podcast. I think I need to have more of those just kind of intimate conversations with people where they feel more comfortable sharing their opinions, and that may not agree with either the general sentiment or me personally, because
Yeah.
people are less likely or feel less comfortable doing that when they're in front of others. They want to put on a polite face, especially in our community of workplace leaders. So I think we will need to have, you know, the freedom to express their doubts and their fears.
Yeah.
And I try to do that on my show, but it's really hard because people don't want to show their vulnerabilities, and
Right.
I get that.
Right. No, absolutely. We both can relate to as we do this, right?
Yeah.
So the last
But the people who do it are
Yeah.
Neil Usher and
There you
Mark
go.
Eltringham.
Yeah,
If you want people who aren't afraid to share their opinions,
100%.
you got two of the best guys here.
100%. So the fantastic, I love his wording, fantastic future of workplace strategy. Now, Neil in this, again, excuse me, Neil in this article lays out a 6-step process. I have no idea what's wrong with my throat. The
I
frog
gave
in
you
my
my
throat.
through the microphone. I infected you with my little frog in
There
the
you go.
throat.
But go do read this LinkedIn article that Neil published. He goes through 6 phases of how you can create that future workplace. How it starts with a perpetual strategy, knowing that we don't know what tomorrow holds. We know it's going to change. So how do you create a perpetual strategy? How do you then build, a dependence on a connected strategy, and it sort of evolves through? And what we've put on the screen here is simply a summary of his article. It's a long article, but I do encourage you to go read it, go have a look at it, and do follow Neil. Neil is great. To your point, he's very opinionated, and he does have alternative viewpoints, and he's not scared to throw them out there. I'm looking forward to chatting with him. I'm chatting with him later.
Brilliant writer. Yeah.
Later this week, so it should be fun.
You do have a conversation on the
do,
schedule
yeah.
with him?
Yeah.
Oh, lucky you. Lucky you.
No interview,
Well,
just
ask him about this
to catch
article.
up. No, I certainly will. And what I like about it is, if you take the last sentence that we put up there, right, in what promises to be the most fascinating and exciting decade yet in workplace, we have to complete, we have to do, and we want to be leading it, right? So in essence, if your position is what it is today, and you're in workplace, you're in real estate, facility management, you're in human resources, you're in CIT, right? There is change happening. Leadership are so focused on this. They want to hear, they want to know. So again, using the words that Neil used and we've talked about before, remaining relevant to your industry, to your organization, to yourself, and to the service of what you're providing to employees. How do we keep ourselves relevant? And then just go through and follow his 6-step process. Think about it, right? Create something that it's beta. Think about software development, right? We have to put that into our heads. This is like software development. It never ends, right? It never comes. There's always going to be constant updates. There's going to be little bugs we find, and we have to keep evolving. We have to keep developing. We have to keep learning. And how do we keep those loops coming back to us so we are informed, so we can see change, we can see what isn't working, and we can make those little tweaks. And it has to be done in unison with our HR counterparts, our CIT, our legal folks, because if you think about what we need to do as companies, through variety of locations, legal understanding is going to be really important. And there's other departments within the organization that we have to bring into it as well: marketing, communications, and risk management, and all those sort of things. But it's like, take a look and think through, how do you want to remain relevant as we think about this exciting, fascinating decade that Neil mentions.
Yeah, I won't add much to that. You summed it up great, Steve. The fact that all I know is when I talk to Neil and I read his book, The Elemental Workplace, and I read these articles, I'm just drinking from a fire hose of a mind that is brilliant and thinking and understanding the science. I want to call it the science of workplace better than anyone I know. And it's over my head. I have to reread and reprocess time and again just to get to where he is. And I'm so thankful there are leaders like him in our industry that are sharing their thoughts via these books and articles. And again, the takeaway is that it's an incredible opportunity. Whatever the hardship, whatever the short-term difficulties we're going through as workplace leaders, and these are challenging and unprecedented times. We've heard the word used too many times. Yes, but to see someone with an optimistic view that really gets it and really understands the history and the strategy and the science of workplace like Neil does is somebody who can really inspire us to press on and deal with this challenge and not make mistakes, but we will make mistakes, but be okay with that and learn from them. And that idea of having a beta and an agile mindset, a software type developer mindset, is something that we all have to think about. So I can't really add much more to it other than to recommend people read that article, especially if you're in a role where you're struggling right now and you feel like what is my future? What is my worth? What can I bring to my organization? If you read this article, you'll get some great ideas.
No, that's great, Mike. That's great. And so finishing up, think about it, right? This new fantastic workplace, it's going to be an exciting decade. How do we get to a new better, right? That's what we need to be thinking about as a
new better. I'm going to use that term.
A new better. I love it.
Like
it's really good. It's really good. So, Mike, thank you for your time today. Everyone, sorry for the interruptions. Sorry for the technical glitches. It's just ironic, Mike, that, I put together this newsletter that goes out every day telling people we'll be live at 8 a.m. and we've yet to be successful in doing that. So, anyway.
Ever since you launched the newsletter, we've had technical problems.
There we go.
But we'll get it right. We'll get it right next time.
All right. Anyway, Mike, thank you.
Have a great day.
Cheers. Have a great day. Take care. Thank you.